GlobeChain is the largest and fastest growing ESG reuse marketplace that helps companies become more sustainable, save money, and achieve their ESG and SDG targets. GlobeChain connects companies from the construction, retail, hospitality, and office sectors with nonprofits, small businesses, and people to redistribute unneeded items, reducing waste from going to landfill. From fixtures and fittings going to thrift stores and being upcycled by fashion students, to construction material being reused to help build schools, items are requested super quickly and help generate impact to local communities. So far, GlobeChain has diverted over 58 million kilograms of items from landfill, and they've helped over 50 million people across the world, saving them 350 million pounds through reuse. Check them out at globechain.com. To keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's important to remove the carbon dioxide that's already been emitted. The most straightforward way to do this is by planting trees. However, some people say trees aren't enough because they take too long to grow before they make a tangible impact. So what other solutions are available? Well, pulling carbon directly out of the air and storing it underground forever. This technology is called direct air capture, also known as DAC or DAC. And when it's combined with storage, DAC plus S, it becomes a permanent climate solution. Today, I speak with Rachael O'Brien, head of marketing for Climeworks, the leader in direct air capture. In this episode, we discuss Climeworks' incredible technology and the crucial role that tech plays in reaching our global environmental goals. Hey, Rachael, thank you very much for joining. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here, and we love what you guys do. So looking forward to this chat.
Well, thank you so much. And likewise, and I'm really looking forward to learning about what Climeworks is doing. And with that, just broadly speaking, kind of starting with sort of the quote unquote elevator pitch, if you will, what exactly is Climeworks?
Great start. Well, I like to describe it as we are a company that is essentially trying to build a time machine to go back in time to when climate change and global warming weren't an existential threat to kind of the world we live in. What we do in order to kind of create that machine is we developed a technology called direct air capture for the permanent removal of CO2 from the air. So direct air capture is it's a technology that's been around for a while, but it wasn't used to actually capture CO2. And so our two founders, Christoph and Jan, they met at university and they studied, they did similar PhDs to each other. And then they said, hey, you know, we need to do something about the climate crisis. They were in the Swiss Alps, always skiing, doing winter sports, and they noticed that the glaciers were retreating, and they were like, we need to, you know, do something as engineers. You know, how can tech play a role in this crisis? And that's where they developed direct air capture for the removal of CO2. And that's what we do now as our business.
So what exactly is direct air capture?
We directly capture CO2 from the air. And how that works is we started in the lab capturing milligrams of CO2, but now we have our largest plant, the world's first and largest carbon dioxide removal plant, which captures tons of CO2 from the air. So if you imagine almost shipping container size blocks, and inside those shipping containers, you have these fans, or they're filters. We call them CO2 collectors, but they're essentially filters, lots of fans with filters, and they draw in ambient air. And then inside that filter, inside that fan is a filter. That filter has a very selective material, which CO2 sticks to. And then we remove the CO2 from the filter. It goes through a number of different processes. It's heated up and then cooled down, heated up and then cooled down. And then the CO2 is liquefied, and we pump the liquefied CO2 to our partners, Carbfix. And they then sequester that CO2, they store it in deep underground in Iceland. So it's a combination of this technology to selectively take CO2 out of the air with a natural occurring process, which is mineralized CO2.
It's an absolutely incredible technology. And I think, well, liquefied CO2, is that a new technology to liquefy CO2, or is that something that is already being done?
No, I mean, it's essentially sparkling water.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, it's liquefied CO2 makes it sound very fancy, but it's essentially sparkling water. Yeah,
Sounds
that's
amazing.
what we put underground. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
okay, so what you're basically doing is creating, to keep it simple for the non-technical people, meaning me. What you're doing is essentially, you've got like a big fan that sucks in a bunch of air. You take out the CO2, you make sparkling water, you send that sparkling water, we're keeping it very basic, to a partner called Carbfix, who then pumps it underground.
Yeah, pretty much. And when we say send, I mean, we operate on basically the same plot of land in
Okay, so you're
Iceland.
next to each
It
other.
is literally sent via a pipe
Okay.
that goes across. It's literally about a kilometer apart. And they have this fantastic technology where they discovered you can basically accelerate a natural occurring process, which I think a lot of people don't know already exists. So this isn't something that's brand new. This is, CO2, it's in the air, it mixes with rainwater, it goes into the ground, and then, it's absorbed basically. And the great thing about Iceland is it's full of basalt rock.
Mm-hmm.
And so the CO2, the sparkling water, goes into the basalt rock, and basalt rock is very much like a hard sponge. It's very porous, and essentially the sparkling water goes into those holes, and then that rock becomes a new matter. It's calcite matter. And another great thing is, it's so deep underground. It's up to, I think it's 800 meters to 2,000 meters underground. Oh. Which is, it's really deep. That's kind of 2 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other, which is pretty massive. And because it's a natural process, because it's so deep underground, it is permanent. So it doesn't come back up. It's not like an earthquake would happen and then suddenly it would, bubble up to the surface again. It's not at risk of extreme weather events. So it will stay down there forever.
Wow. And so when you pump this liquefied CO2 or sparkling water into underground, it stays as sparkling, or it just stays as this liquid material for forever, or you said something about calcite?
Yes, it solidifies. So the sparkling water essentially fills these holes within the basalt rock, and within 2 years it becomes solidified, and then you have a new rock, pretty much. So it's basalt with these lovely, I say lovely, they look really cool because they're kind of like crystallized CO2 and they're like white calcite. It's really fantastic to see. It looks pretty incredible when you see it in real life.
Yeah, wow. I can't even imagine. I mean, that is very cool. And you're saying that process is naturally occurring and it's happening basically every time it rains.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, it's something that's already happening. I mean, when we think about where CO2 comes from and fossil fuels, I mean, it was all in the ground, and we've just been drilling it up. So there's this natural cycle that was happening, and due to human activities, we've just been like speeding up the extraction, but not putting it back. And essentially, what we're trying to do with Carbfix is putting what we took out back in the ground.
By literally, yeah. That's really cool. And I think that's a really good kind of segue to the next question of, why is your technology or Climeworks technology so important at this specific point in time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, ideally, we would have been doing this for decades already, but the technology wasn't kind of there or established. So what we have right now is the first priority is reduction. So we will be the first to say, reduce everything you can as much as possible, and then remove what you can't. And the reason we also say that is because, unfortunately, there is too much CO2 in the air. So even if we did stop like drastically stopped right now using fossil fuels, there's still too much legacy CO2 in the air, which is just there, and it's not going to be sequestered by carbon sinks and things like that because there's just too much. And actually the IPCC say that we need to remove up to 10 billion tons of CO2 every single year until 2050, which is an obscene amount, but it shows the magnitude of the problem. And so direct air capture, when combined with CO2 storage, that's a great option and complementary solution to other solutions out there in order to remove emissions. You know, we work with many different scientists and policymakers and things like that, and it's now really getting the attention it deserves. I think before it felt very sci-fi. I'm sure to some people it seems still. My grandpa talks about it on Saturday with him. He still thinks it's sci-fi, but it's really needed that time to kind of grow and build and become a solution that people believe in, a climate tech that people can get behind. We kind of see it as, you know, 10 years ago where solar and wind were, where, you know, the scientists were saying we need to do this, we need to, you know, make it appealing and also accessible to everyday people, and direct air capture needs to also do the same, and we're slowly getting there. Like we had a big funding round back in April, so that's really allowing us get to scale and to grow and to you know, make a meaningful difference with the removal, but we still have way to go, and that's why we're trying really hard to kind of raise the awareness of direct air capture and of course how we can all take climate action.
And in terms of direct air capture, I mean, I suppose why direct air capture and not maybe other solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, again, we would always say, look, you know, we're not the only solution, we need all the solutions working together, but the unique thing about direct air capture is how efficient it is, and efficient meaning power, meaning land use. So if you took, for example, the amount of CO2 that we need to remove from the air from a land perspective, and you wanted to do that by planting trees, you would need the size of Europe or 2 times India in order to have enough space to have enough trees to remove CO2 over their lifetime. And with direct air capture in our particular structure and machines, which I said, you know, the shipping container formats, so they're modular and they're stackable and very scalable, it's 1,000 times more efficient in terms of land usage. And that's land that's also needed for many other things like agriculture. I mean, there's cost of living and inflation and food prices and everything's going crazy. It's a more efficient technology. The other part of it is we're only powered by renewable energy, and we will only ever be powered by renewable energy. So the great thing about having our plant in Iceland is, you know, you've got geothermal energy everywhere. There's volcanoes, and you know, so it's fantastic. Not only does it look fantastic, but it's also great for, you know, we're not kind of incurring any more CO2 emissions by using electricity from elsewhere, and it's permanent. So, like I mentioned, with the CO2 storage, with it becoming like it's an accelerated natural process, our solution means that you do store the CO2 forever. And the unfortunate thing with, you know, if you're only relying on planting trees and some of these other solutions is, first of all, trees need, you know, up to 100 years in order to sequester CO2 because they need time to grow, obviously. And then the other thing is, you know, ultimately extreme weather events are happening, they will become more frequent, and these natural based solutions are more susceptible to those disasters. So keep planting trees, keep doing what you can, but we need direct air capture as well in order to have that permanent effect.
So it's one of the options in sort of the climate change portfolio, or it's one of the tools in the tool belt, so to speak.
Definitely. And that's, I think, the great thing with direct air capture and what we have at Climeworks is there's also an option to take personal commitment there. There's a lot of solutions out there which they're not available to the everyday person, which is why planting trees is obviously so popular as well, because you can plant a tree. It's like adopting an animal kind of mentality. But with direct air capture, with Climeworks, you can also take a subscription, and you can pay every single month to remove, whether it's 1 kilogram, 5 kilograms, 100 kilograms a month, and we remove that CO2 for you. And you feel like you're also making that commitment, and you could do that as part of your own like personal portfolio, for example, or it could be that, you know, it's more to balance your lifestyle, it's to remove specific emissions related to transport. But I think the really cool thing about it is you can take climate action into your own hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes you feel in control when maybe governments aren't exactly providing the stability that you crave.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing that I always think about and talk about on, at least on Sustainability Champions, is the ability for individuals to be able to take action and take control of what they do. And of course we're all in this together, as you know, we're frequently reminded, and yes, it's true. But at the same time, we can't be so busy relying on other people to take action that we forget to take action ourselves. And so little things done by many people compounds, and it actually works. And we can talk more about how people can get personally involved with Climeworks a little later. But I think that is a big aspect, or a big attractor, at least from the point of view of like what you're saying about trees. You're absolutely right. You know, you plant a tree and it can take 30, 50, 100 years for it to fully reach the amount of carbon capacity that it's able to store and sequester, et cetera. How quickly, if you have this figure on hand, in theory, would it take from, you know, if we compare that number of how long it takes for a tree to sequester carbon to how quickly it takes for a Climeworks plant to start sequestering, how much faster is it?
I mean, our orca plant, so we have our largest plant at the moment is called Orca, which is the Icelandic name for energy as well.
Oh, cool.
So that's cool. That's launched last September, and it removes up to 4,000 tons a year of CO2. And that is it's removing CO2 every day. It's capturing CO2 every day. So in that sense, it's much more efficient.
And so you mentioned that you have, it sounds like you have more than one plant. So how many Climeworks plants are there?
Well, at the moment, we have the one in Iceland, Orca, that is removing 4,000 tons of CO2 per year. And when we say removing, that's because we're also storing the CO2.
Right.
We do have our next plant under construction. It's called Mammoth because of the size. Also, interesting fact, some scientists say that the mammoth went extinct because of climate change. So that was kind of a nice play for us. Yes, and that's due to complete at the end of 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, and that will have the nominal capacity of removing up to 40,000 tons of CO2 per year.
Wow, so 10 times larger than Orca. Exactly.
And we also plan to just keep doing 10 times the next plant every few years, because we need to, we really need to scale to be what we say climate relevant. You know, at the moment, 4,000 tons, it's fantastic that we've been able to prove our technology in the field, because actually we're the only company who have a plant that size doing what it's doing, removing CO2, and we're learning so much from having the technology in the field. And so every single plant will be not only bigger, but it will be more efficient, more effective, because we're learning constantly on the go. And so that's our plan. So we really have this journey to gigaton. We need to get to, we're at tons now, we need to get to megaton and then gigaton. And then we have a shot at keeping 1.5 in sight.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like a huge project. If well, yeah, quite literally, right? Mammoth. So,
Mammoth problem.
yes. Where, if I may ask, and where is Mammoth going to be, or where is it?
So Mammoth will also be in Iceland. In fact, it's actually on the same, next to them. Basically, Orca and Mammoth are neighbours, and they're also neighbours with Climeworks, our storage partner, and they're also neighbours with OnPower, which is our geothermal supplier of energy as well. But Iceland is a really unique and special place. And Climeworks have this incredible technology, and you also have the geothermal energy. But you could sequester CO2 kind of pretty much anywhere on this planet. And so there's multiple different locations being looked at. It could be in the US, it could be in the UK. We've also got a pilot running in Oman with a company called 4401. And the rock there is not basalt rock, it's a different type of rock. So there's so many options out there. We have plenty of rock to store CO2. So that's why we're like, we should be doing much more of this, and we would encourage other people to do this, to scale as well, so that we can all be removing enough CO2 from the air.
Yeah, and out of curiosity, would you have to, does Climeworks need to also expand their capacity in order to meet this new, mammoth size amount of sparkling water that you're going to be sending their way?
I mean, in Iceland, you actually have enough basalt rock to remove all of the CO2 from the air that we need to. Oh, wow. So you could actually just do it all in Iceland. But of course, and Climeworks and using our CO2 to store, but they're also storing at point source as well. So they remove a power plant CO2, but what we're really focused on is removing the excess. So rather than keeping the level of CO2 the same, we really want to remove what's already been emitted. Yeah, I mean, you can. There's plenty of companies in other countries who are also trialing this technology or similar technology. So yeah, we just need it all to happen much quicker.
Yeah, and on that point, you mentioned that every few years you want to increase your capacity by 10x, or each plant's capacity by 10x from the previous one. How many plants do you plan on having in the next 10, 20? I mean, what's sort of the thinking in terms of how much you'll actually scale and build?
I mean, with the current technology as it is, and it being scalable and stackable, I mean, you would have essentially a plot which has lots of different collectors, or what we could say more simply is the shipping collectors with the fans. So actually it depends on how big you can have that, how big the storage site is as well. But as we say, I mean, every few years we would want to be, you could just have one site which has kind of hundreds of different collectors all stacked. Mammoth, for example, the design is very similar to Orca, but we're stacking 3 rather than 2. And as we keep learning in the field, it could be that we can stack higher or we stack wider, and then you don't need as much space and you can just go up. So it could be that, yeah, you have one every few years up until 2050, and then we see if we need any more, if we need to, I imagine we would keep all of them kind of, or some of them running, at least keeping everything at bay. But hopefully that by that point, we've also drastically cut fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's a.
By then.
Sorry, say it one more time.
Ideally, by 2050, you might not need it Climeworks anymore. So.
Yeah, no, that's actually one of my thinking, or one of my questions really is, what happens if we meet all of our climate targets and we don't need, or I suppose carbon targets, and we don't need it? And it sounds like, well, you said we won't need Climeworks anymore. So is there a contingent, like a plan in place if somehow we're able to completely remove or get away from all emissions? What happens then? Because I suppose we do need some carbon in the atmosphere, or CO2 in the atmosphere.
Totally, and that is a question that comes up a lot, actually. I mean, especially we get questions on some of our channels about, are you removing too much? We need it to live. Unfortunately, there is way too much in the air that will never be a problem. It would be, if we were anywhere near close to getting to that problem, I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. It would be, oh my God, we've reversed climate change. You know, the world isn't on fire.
Yeah.
So I think it's a valid concern, because I think when people do their research, they start thinking, hey, we need CO2 to live and to breathe, and animals and everything else. But yeah, I mean, 10 billion tons per year is obscene.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's no way that we will be able to remove that until, you know, we get to gigaton capacity, which is going to take a number of years. I think another point is, you know, we really need everyone working together. Like we said, you know, whether it's lobbyists or whether it's you know, individuals taking climate action, private sector, governments, etc. We really need to have everyone working together to get to that point, because we need to fund the scale up in order to get to gigatons. So at the moment, you know, we're removing 4,000 tons of CO2 a year. You know, in order to get to this gigaton, we really need everyone on board, really backing direct air capture as, you know, the #1 kind of solution in climate tech, to push in order to actually have that problem. So we've got time on our hands to get there.
What about capturing, because so you're actually capturing carbon dioxide, but when we think of greenhouse gases, and it can get a little bit confusing, because sometimes when we talk about CO2, we're referring frequently to all the greenhouse gases, but as a way to easily count, we talk about CO2e, or CO2 equivalency or equivalent. But what about capturing something that's much more potent, like methane? Well, first of all, is that something Climeworks is thinking about? Is it something that you're even able to do at this point? Is it something that is worth pursuing? Kind of lots of questions, but yeah.
Really good question. So, I mean, for us, the focus on CO2 is because of the effect it has on global warming, and CO2 itself is the biggest driver of climate change, and that's why we focus on CO2. Although recognize methane is totally potent, and we need to, you know, everyone also needs to consider reducing that. At the moment, we're not looking at methane. We are just looking at CO2, and I think, you know, with our technology that we've developed, it's super selective, so it really does just it finds the CO2 molecule and it captures it. So if you imagine, so one molecule out of 2,500 is CO2. So it's like walking around in London or New York or whatever, and trying to find one person in a crowd of 2,500. Like, obviously that would be very difficult. And so our technology is so selective, and it's taken, you know, a number of years to get to that point where we can actually do it outside of the lab and do it at, you know, taking thousands. So I think, you know, methane would probably be a different direction in terms of technology, and how you remove it. But I'm sure there's very innovative startups and companies trying it or doing it at the moment. Yeah,
it's kind of like you said, you know, we need all the solutions, and just thinking something like methane requires, it just has, it's so potent that it might be worth looking into, but it's probably even more challenging because CO2 is extremely common and everywhere, but methane is such a, it's so much less, what's it called? Yeah, there's just a lot less of it in the air.
Exactly.
It's much more challenging. And so, I mean, what are Climeworks' long-term goals, and what does it look like if we fully adopt this technology and we're going all out, we are somehow meeting these 10 gigatons of reduction per year? What ideally does the future look like?
So we like to look at the future as we see what the recommendations are from science, so from the IPCC and others, and we really have that 2050 goal in mind, which I think 2050 is thrown around quite a lot because countries and companies have this net zero pressure, and it's always it's 2030, 2035, 2050. So for us, it's very much we're focused on that 2050 mark and our journey to gigaton, so our journey to getting to that point where we have plants that are pulling copious amounts of CO2 from the air. But to get to that point, we actually have just had a couple of announcements. One was that we have just opened an entity in the US. So at the moment we are head office in Zurich in Switzerland. We also have an entity in Cologne in Germany, and of course we have a presence in Iceland. And so this is a huge step for us actually to go, right, we really want to recognize that the US is a huge market for us, but also the landmass is very interesting. So now we're sort of taking the steps to hire people from the US and to really break some ground there. So that's really exciting. And then we've also just developed a methodology with our partners Climbworks in Iceland, which is a methodology which is to certify carbon dioxide removal via direct air capture and storage. And that's the direct air capture and storage is what we and Climbworks do. Of course, there's other carbon dioxide removal solutions. So we've developed this methodology together, and then that's now been validated by the DNV. The DNV being an international certification registrar for sustainability and environment, amongst other things. So for us, it's really that's a huge step and a huge milestone, because being validated, but creating something that can be validated is just more confirmation that this is the right climate tech to be backing and to be taking forward. So that's really huge. And then also having this US presence is also huge. So for us, it's now we've got Mammoth in our site, and then now it's next plant. What do we do after Mammoth? Where's the next plant after Mammoth going to be, and how big is it going to be? And yeah, so it's very exciting, but it's a little bit under wraps, I think, at the moment after Mammoth.
You mentioned that at the beginning you were telling your dad about the work that you do, and he still doesn't really understand what you're doing or how it works. So what would you say? I mean, because there's clearly a role that technology plays in achieving our climate environmental goals, but I suppose there are people who are nervous that technology and a company like Climeworks may be doing more harm than good by somehow, taking air out of the atmosphere and pumping it 2 Eiffel Towers worth, down into the ground, and who knows what the implications are. What about unintended consequences? So, in terms of for any concerns about how technology is being used to sort of quote unquote potentially mess with the environment, what is your and Climeworks' response to that?
So they're totally valid concerns as well. I think there's this fear sometimes, like you said, with the whole sci-fi thing, it's, tech's taking over, AI is going to suddenly dominate and we're all going to become slaves to these robots. So totally valid concern. I think what we could say is, making sure that what we do does not negatively impact the world we live in. So the landscape, wildlife, agriculture, that's one of our top priorities. Actually, interestingly, the site selection for our first large scale plant, Orca, the reason it is where it is in Iceland is because it doesn't have any negative impact on the surroundings there. Imagine Iceland's got pretty drastic large landscape. There's not a huge amount of wildlife in certain areas, and so one of the reasons that we chose that location was because naturally you've got Climbworks there, and you've also got the geothermal, but also it's not disrupting the world we live in. And I think one way to view it is, sometimes you see in these towns and cities, you have these really old buildings taken over by the natural world, so trees coming in, the roots taking over, but then you have these skyscrapers that go up. And I really like to think of Orca like that. It's this, you've got this like huge landscape around, and then you have this machine.
Mm.
And there's something really beautiful about the two of them being together and working in harmony, using geothermal energy, using the ambient air. You need a certain climate as well to be able to remove the CO2. And there's something really beautiful about that working together as opposed to it being harmful. I would also say, I think we would never say that technology is the only solution. Definitely not. And unfortunately, we're at a point that we need this technology solution as well as the natural solutions, because the natural solutions, either they require a lot of water. So reforestation requires a lot of water, a lot of land, a lot of labor. You also then have the risk of extreme weather events like floods and fires and things like that. They take a lot longer to sequester CO2. It's never us versus nature. It's very much, we need them all working together. And luckily there is this technology which can kind of work in harmony. And I think when you see some of the windmills, in the landscape, I always think of Scotland, where you have these lovely mounds of nature, and then these big giant windmills. And to me, it's beautiful that we're at a point in our civilization where we can have these two working together and not detrimental to each other.
Mm-hmm. And part of that, is it sounds like you're quite aware of what is and is not going on from an environmental perspective, where Orca is, and so before you start building it, are kind of environmental studies in terms of, like you said, wildlife, or the landscape, or even how Carbfix's technology works. Are there sort of studies being done to demonstrate and to share, to just be sure rather that this isn't having any sort of major environmental implications?
Definitely. Whenever there's a site selection process, there is a very, very rigorous process with, for example, the Icelandic government had to be involved. The Swiss government were also involved. So
wow.
It takes a long while to get to those points. But yeah, of course, there are multiple stakeholders, some of which are animals and plant life, that we have to consider. And that's why a lot of people ask us, why can't you just put one of these machines just where CO2 is emitted, or where we feel it's emitted, because it's we associate sometimes CO2 with pollution, and it's because it can disrupt the landscape that you're already in. And also CO2, it doesn't matter where you take it from, because it moves so quickly around the globe that it's not kind of just stuck in one place. But there's, as I said, there's plenty of studies done.
Fascinating. And yeah, I can understand why, based on that, it makes sense to build Mammoth next door to Orca, because all of that's already there. All you're doing is just building another version of it. Yeah, that makes sense. And we were talking about personal commitments earlier, and how what you're doing is interesting for individuals because they have a chance to really get involved. So what do you mean by getting involved?
So we really like to take the opinion that climate action is for everyone. I think it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. I've been talking about gigatons and millions of tons that we have to remove and drastically, and that can kind of get a bit overwhelming for people. And I think it's natural for everyone to want to feel included and like they're part of something. Whether it's because you want to reduce your carbon footprint, or whether it's because you want to help scale a technology which is, like we've been discussing, it's not in its early stages, but it's definitely got a long way to go to be climate relevant. What we provide is a service where you can basically sign up for as long as you want. You can do a month, you can do just a one-off payment. Maybe it's because you had to make a journey and you want to remove the emissions of that journey. You could just do that in one go. You could also buy a gift for someone of carbon dioxide removal. I actually like to do that for my family members. It's perfect because it's also a gift which educates people. It's also a gift which is possibly one of the most sustainable things you can ever give.
Mhm.
And it's also really cool because it's for some people they're really hard to buy for, and this is really unique. So there's that element, but I mean, really, it's that individual commitment and choice and feeling like you're part of a movement. And we have this great community. We have, I think, nearly 16,000 climate pioneers. That's what we call them, because they are climate pioneers. And they are removing, choosing to remove CO2, to support Climeworks, and to also, make themselves feel like they're part of this journey with us. They're taking climate action themselves. And so yeah, you can do whatever suits your lifestyle, and feel like you're making a difference.
Yeah, super cool. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but why do you believe, and why does Climeworks believe that we need that individual contribution? Why can't we just really say, well, let's leave it to governments and big businesses? They're the ones that got us into this mess, so they should get us out of it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, very good point. It's a feeling amongst most of us. I mean, so the carbon market at the moment is, the carbon removal market is voluntary at the moment. There isn't a compliance carbon market. It's not like wind and solar yet. And for us, it's two things. It's people taking part in order to actually help us scale the technology, remove big chunks of CO2 from the air. And then the other side is, there is power in people. The more people that sign up, doesn't matter if it's $1 a month, $10 a month, whatever it is, there is real power in people coming together and creating a mission and a movement. And that is really powerful to policymakers, big businesses. If it's you're an employee of a company, and you have a voice, and you get to say to your, whether it's your MD or your CEO or chief sustainability officer, every little helps, and every voice should be heard. And the more people that band together and support us, the more we can scale the technology, but also the more that people will start to notice and want to, realize that this is something that we need to do, and it needs to be on the same level as solar and wind.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about Climeworks and getting involved, and either Christmas will be coming around any minute now, as these things happen. Yeah. So for gifts or anything like this, where is the best place for people to learn more and potentially get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, you could go to climeworks.com. That is where we live. And on there, you have many options to learn about the technology, learn about our different partners, our customers. You can also read testimonials from our climate pioneers. And on there, you can also remove CO2. So we have a number of different options. Like I mentioned, you can either create an action plan where you subscribe monthly, or you can give a gift, or you can just make a one-off purchase if that suits better for your choice. Fantastic.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for going through all of this with me today. I think the work you're doing is so cool, and it's a unique approach to a really big challenge. And like you said, it's one of the tools in the tool belt that's required, and it's a way for everyone to be able to get involved and support technology that clearly is growing quickly, and there's a lot more room to grow. So yeah, good luck with all of the launch in the US and everything else, as well as building out Mammoth.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
GlobeChain is the largest and fastest growing ESG reuse marketplace that helps companies become more sustainable, save money, and achieve their ESG and SDG targets. GlobeChain connects companies from the construction, retail, hospitality, and office sectors with nonprofits, small businesses, and people to redistribute unneeded items, reducing waste from going to landfill. From fixtures and fittings going to thrift stores and being upcycled by fashion students, to construction material being reused to help build schools, items are requested super quickly and help generate impact to local communities. So far, GlobeChain has diverted over 58 million kilograms of items from landfill, and they've helped over 50 million people across the world, saving them 350 million pounds through reuse. Check them out at globechain.com.